Chair, we're now live.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Sorry about the delay. I had a problem with my laptop, but we're in now and we can start the meeting. So good afternoon. Welcome to this meeting of Northern Planning Committee. I am Councillor Paul Wynne, Chair of the committee. This meeting is being live streamed so members of the public can hear the audio of the meeting and view the papers shown on the screen. If any committee member experiences technical difficulties during the meeting, please contact IT on the number you already have. Please mute your microphones unless asked to speak and re-mute after speaking. Use the chat function to indicate you want to speak, but nothing else, because the debate has to be heard by those listening to the audio feed. Members should ensure that they are present throughout the meeting, as you cannot vote on any item if you have not heard all the debate. As Chair, I will interpret the Council's existing standing orders in light of the requirements of the remote participation with advice from the monitoring officer prior to making a ruling. At the start of the meeting, I will ask members of the committee to confirm their presence and any disclosable pecuniary interests. So now we shall do the roll call and see if there's any. Members must disclose any pecuniary interest in any matters to be discussed, which is not included in the register of interest, and leave the meeting by turning off their camera. Mute the microphones prior to the matter being discussed. Right, we'll do the roll call now. Councillor Roy Aldercroft.
Present and no interests.
Thank you. Councillor Nicholas Bardsley.
Present, no interest.
Councillor Gerald Dakeen.
Present, and item number 9, 23 Church Lane, Ashmagna, is in my ward, but I shan't be speaking on it, and I shall leave the meeting when it happens.
Thank you, Gerald. Councillor Pauline D, I know isn't very well, and we hope a swift recovery. She's got COVID, so all the very best to Pauline. Councillor Nat Green.
Present, and I need to declare that I'm a twin-handed member of Shrewsbury Town Council and on the Town Council Planning Committee.
Thank you. Councillor Vince Hunt.
Present and no pecuniary interest.
Councillor Mark Jones.
Present and no pecuniary interests.
Thank you. Councillor Pamela Mosley.
Present, no interest to declare.
Thank you. Councillor Keith Roberts. Councillor Keith Roberts. Are you on mute? Right, we'll move on. Councillor David Vasmere.
Present and no interest to declare.
Myself, I have no interest to declare. Going back to Councillor Keith Roberts, are we there yet? Okay, we'll move on then. Right.
Councillor Dean here, substituting for Councillor D.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, we're going to go to that in a minute for the apologies, but thank you for that, Julian.
Okay, no, nothing to declare, but twin-hatted on the Town Council Planning Committee in Shrewsbury as well.
Thank you very much, Julian. Right, please can the officers now confirm their presence? Planning officers.
Philip Molyneux, Principal Planner.
Kelvin Hall, Principal Planner.
A solicitor.
Miranda Garrard, Solicitor.
Thank you, Miranda. Committee officer.
Shelley Davis, Committee Officer.
Thank you, Shelley. Any others? Nope.
Chair, excuse me, it's Miranda. There are a couple of other members you might want to just ask to introduce themselves who have joined the meeting because they're local members and therefore will be speaking on matters in their wards.
Okay. Will that come under?
As they're present, I think they should sort of make their presence known so at least the public know that they're here waiting for their items, Chair.
Okay, could you come forward?
Hello.
Yeah.
Councillor Brian Williams here. I am speaking on item 7, the proposed dwelling to the west of 14 Ellesmere Road, Tetchell, as I am the county councillor for the Tetchell area. Councillor Brian Williams, present and no interest to declare.
Thank you, Brian.
Councillor Joyce Barrow, representative for the St Oswald Division. I'll be speaking on item 6, single plot exemption site, affordable dwelling and garage, and it's the site off west of Vine Cottage, Middleton Road, Middleton. Thank you.
Thank you, Joyce. I think we have one more, don't we? Alex, is he there? I think Councillor Alex Phillips is going to join us at some time.
Chair, he hasn't arrived as yet.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, can the committee officer confirm any apologies and substitutes, please?
Hello, Shelley Davis, committee officer. We have apologies from Councillor Pauline D and Councillor Julian Dean is substituting.
That's great, thank you. Item 2, to confirm the minutes of Northern Planning Committee meeting held on the 8th of December. I move that the minutes of the previous Northern Planning Committee meeting held on the 8th of December 2020 as circulated be signed as a correct record. Can I have a seconder, please?
Seconder, Councillor Allcroft.
Right. I will now accept these minutes as
Chair, sorry to interrupt. Councillor Vasmer has asked if he could speak on the minutes.
Okay, yeah, I was just going to ask that actually. Yeah, I was going to say now can I accept these minutes. A true record unless anyone else has indicated differently. So, yes, Councillor Vasmer.
Yes, thanks, Chair. I don't want to challenge minutes in particular, but note that they seem to be changing. If you go back to minutes in January, for example, which looked at, there was kind of quite a summary of the debate. Then later on in August, the minutes seem to kind of contain bullet points of the debates, whereas these minutes contain virtually nothing about the debate, or very little about the debates which took place. And I wonder whether there's been a change of policy as far as taking minutes is concerned.
Miranda, could you help me here?
I think there has, Chair, and legally the minutes simply have to record the decision taken. These particular meetings that are dealt with by Microsoft Teams Live are also recorded as such, so the minutes simply record the decisions taken.
Okay, can we clarify that for sure later? Is that okay?
I'll do my best, Chair. Yes, I think it's the monitoring officer had been in touch with group leaders, I believe, about this.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll have confirmation sometimes, David. Is that okay? Right. Well, where are we? Item 3, public question time. Committee officer, are there any public questions?
No, there's no public questions, Chair.
Thank you very much. Item 4, disclosable pecuniary interest. This has been dealt with during the initial roll call of the meeting. Turning to the substantive items, the planning officer will present the item. We will deal with the public speaking part of the meeting, then open to members of the committee to debate. Item 5 is Hencott Farm, Cross Hill, Shrewsbury. Can the planning officer introduce themselves and present this item, please?
Thank you, Chair. Kelvin Hall, Principal Planning Officer. This is an application for change of use of land for the erection of 20 holiday lodges and provision of parking areas and associated landscaping at Hencott Farm in Shrewsbury, and it's an amended description. Before I start, please note that the extent of the site shown on the plan on the front of the committee report is the original application area and is incorrect. The correct area will be shown in the PowerPoint slides following. Next slide, please. This application, members will recall, was brought to the previous North Planning Committee in December last year. Members raised concerns that the proposal constituted overdevelopment, that it would impact on the tranquil nature of the area, and that it would have an adverse visual impact. At the previous meeting, members were minded to refuse the application on these grounds, and the application was deferred for further consideration. It is the opinion of officers that the reasons for refusal suggested by members will be difficult to defend successfully at appeal. However, since the December meeting, the applicant has amended the application significantly in order to seek to address members' concerns. The site, as shown red, is located at Hencote Winery and Vineyard in a countryside location to the north of Shrewsbury Town Centre. The site also includes 10 existing glamping units. This slide shows the main residential areas to the south and the east. I should point out that the pre-submission version of the Shropshire Local Plan has recently been approved, and this includes a proposed housing allocation of 450 houses on land to the south of the site, where it says Hencote on this plan. The nearest part of the allocation would be around 200 metres from the site. The draft plan is out for public consultation at present, but given its early stages, limited weight should be given to this draft allocation. Next slide, please. This is a more detailed location plan. You'll see that there's a house adjoining the site boundary to the east. The existing glamping units can be seen to the southwest. The winery and restaurant is to the west, and vehicle access is via a private access road from Ellesmere Road to the east. Next slide. This shows the topography of the area. The northern part is generally flat, and then the land to the south is on a south-facing slope. Next slide. So this shows the revised layout now submitted. The application now omits the 6 lodges that were to be located at the northwest side of the site, in the rectangular area which is on the left-hand side of this plan. These would have been by far the most visible units, so their removal would reduce any visual impacts by a significant degree. The proposal is now for 2 individual lodge sites, as shown, 10 lodges at the north part and to the north of the access road, and 10 lodges to the south of the access road. Both sites, as you can see, are adjoining the existing glamping site. Car parking would be at the northwest part of the site, to the west of the lodges. Next slide. This shows an aerial photograph. That part shown as the collection area is no longer proposed. That's the bit that's been omitted now from the application. Next slide. These are photographs of the 2 sites. The top one is the family area. As you can see, it's on flat ground adjacent to the road. The couples area is within a valley feature, as shown on the bottom photograph. Next slide. These show the design of the family lodge as presented before in the December committee meeting. Be of timber construction, 2-bedroom compartments, a shower and a WC, a kitchen, dining, living room, and an external decking area. Next slide. This is the smaller lodge designed for couples. They would have a bedroom, a shower, WC, a kitchen, and an external decking area. Next slide. Proposed landscaping includes tree and hedge planting in and around the lodges, shown green. Also, a copse would be planted between the family lodges and the White House dwelling at the northeastern side of the site, shaded dark grey. Next slide. The top photo shows the topography of the site. The family lodges will be to the left of the existing glamping units that you can see, and beyond this the land falls away towards Shrewsbury. The bottom photo shows the view looking south from the couples area. Next slide. And this is a panorama photograph showing the existing lodges on the left hand side and the winery buildings on the right hand side. This is the site from where the 6 lodges which have now been omitted would have been viewed. No lodges are now proposed at this part of the site, so this view is now retained. If we could go back to a previous slide now, please, 15, I think. yeah, 15. So you can see the development would take up a small proportion of the overall site, and the majority of it would remain in use as a winery and vineyard. The units will be sufficient distance from main areas of housing to avoid noise and disturbance. A thick belt of trees will be planted to provide privacy to the White House. The council's landscape consultant has visited the site. His comments are at section 3.4 of the report, and are that the revised layout would have a minor to negligible effect on visual amenity and a negligible effect on landscape character, and officers agree with this assessment. So there are no objections from the highways team regarding existing traffic, additional traffic. External lighting will be minimal and motion activated, and there will be no lights within the designated dark areas of the site, shown in dark grey here, to avoid ecological disturbance. The Habitat Regulations Assessment in Appendix A of the original report concludes that the proposal would not affect the integrity of the Hencote Pool Ramsar site to the north. And in summary, the site is in a relatively sustainable location close to Shrewsbury Town Centre, and planning policies give support for tourism facilities in sustainable locations. It constitutes an expansion of a successful tourist facility, and officers consider that the benefits of this would outweigh any limited harm. Therefore, it's recommended that permission is granted. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any public speakers on this matter have submitted written statements to be read out in accordance with the revised procedure for public speaking. The local member may read out their own or may have elected for the solicitor to also read theirs. Can the solicitor read out any statements, please?
Thank you, Chair. Miranda Garrard speaking. I understood that Councillor Phillips was intending to join the meeting to read his own, but I have just checked the meeting participants. It doesn't appear that he's joined us. So if you're content, Chair, I will read his statement for him as we reach that point.
Thank you very much, Miranda.
Okay. So Councillor Phillips states, I have considered these proposals and the reduction in units to 20. Though I note the economic benefits such a development can bring, I cannot support it. This is because, 1, it is a countryside site, so any extra activity should be limited and economically subservient to the main agricultural business that takes place on the site. The current 10 glamping units and restaurant could be argued to be economically subservient at a stretch, but the 20 units cannot, and very much change the nature and financial balance of uses of the site. 2. Noise. Most campsites, glamping sites in Shropshire of a similar or a larger scale are not close to residential developments. This is Herongate plus the 8 homes at Winnie Hill View are nearby, and since these plans were originally drawn up, there is a potential new allocation of 450 homes near Hubert Way in the proposed local plan. The impact of noise, amplified by the hillside location, especially late evening, would not be acceptable for nearby large-scale residential estates. Also, the proposed 450 homes will be located closer to the glamping site than other existing significant residential developments. 3. Highways. Congestion. 20 extra units plus the significant amounts of support staff needed to support the guests and maintain the units will generate extra traffic on an already over-congested Ellesmere Road, cause too much turning traffic on a junction that does not have good sight lines and experiences speeding traffic. The proposed local plan recognises this, stating that the 450 homes development near Hubert Way should not be started until the North West Relief Road is completed. Though I am opposed to this development, if the committee do approve it, then I would suggest that a similar condition is used here, and the expansion of glamping facilities proposed here can only take place when the North West Relief Road is completed. 4. Environmental impact. The application notes that there is not a pavement on the side road and no crossing to the pavement on the other side, plus buses are infrequent and there is not a bus stop immediately by the proposed development. Therefore, journeys into town will probably be by car, to the detriment of air quality and an increase in greenhouse gas emissions. For the reasons above, the development is, notwithstanding the reduction in units, still a very significant non-agricultural expansion on what is a countryside site to the detriment of the environment, local roads infrastructure and local residents. I believe that the committee should continue to reject this application. Chair, we then have a statement for the application from the agent Andrew Balshaw, and he states, following the Council's solicitor's deferral of this application, following the committee's vote to refuse this application, and following a site visit by senior planning officers and their landscape consultant, the applicant has reconsidered the application and has reduced the number of lodges from 26 to 20. Council officers' site visit was arranged to attempt to justify the reasons for refusal suggested by councillors following their vote to refuse. The planning officer has responded to the objections raised within the committee report. We will go on to clarify these further. Reasons for refusal raised by committee. 1. Overdevelopment and would impact on the tranquil nature of the area. We have reduced the number of glamping units from 26 to 20. This is a 23% reduction in numbers. Retains the view from Hencote Lane. The Council's landscape consultant confirms the overall effect on the landscape of the 20 units will be minor to negligible, as suggested in the landscape visual impact assessment. The landscape consultant stated he was impressed by the quality and maintenance to the existing planting works. 2. Adverse visual impact on the landscape in this prominent countryside location. The Council's landscape consultant states, external viewpoints of the proposed glamping units would comprise semi-obscured views from Ellesmere Road around Hencote Dairy through occasional gaps in the existing intervening vegetation and landform, short sections of Hencote Lane over the existing roadside hedge, the White House, mostly the upper stories of dwellings on Winnie Hill View and potentially the upper stories of a few dwellings on the west side of Ashfields Road and the Herongate Estate. The Council's officers state, now that the collection site has been omitted from the proposal, it is considered that the remaining 2 sites for a total of 20 lodges would not adversely impact on visual amenity or the character and appearance of the landscape. 3. Impact on the tranquil nature of the area. Council officers are of the opinion that any activity and noise generated by the 20 additional lodges now proposed in this amended scheme would not significantly impact on the tranquil nature of the area, referred to by some members of the committee. The site is close to the Shrewsbury urban area and the busy Ellesmere Road, and it is not considered that 20 additional lodges would make any discernible difference to how the nature of the site is currently perceived. Please also note the glamping units are non-digital and are not fitted with televisions or radios, and only minimal habitat-sensitive lighting will be utilised as pathfinding. 4. Intensification of the site. We have now reduced the number of glamping units to 20. This brings the percentage of the site proposed for glamping, including the existing units, to less than 8%. The Council officers advise it is not considered that the proposal represents an over-intensification of the holiday use of the overall site, and would also not result in a significant intensification in traffic movements compared to the existing use of the overall site that includes the winery, the restaurant and 10 existing glamping units. Other points to consider: highways and access. Highways have already stated that the existing access is acceptable to serve the site, including the original 26 glamping units proposed. Now we have reduced this to 20 glamping units. That's the end of the public speaking items, Chair. I should just mention to you that after the start of this item, Councillor Keith Roberts was able to join and has indicated that as he joined then, he wouldn't participate in item 5.
Thank you for that, Miranda. Okay, just before any further, Keith, can we do you have an interest in this one? I presume you can't join anyway, so that's okay. So, does the planning officer wish to clarify any points in the response?
Yes, please, Chair. Kelvin Hall. Just in relation to one of the points that Councillor Phillips made about the North West Relief Road. And his suggestion that that if members are minded to approve the application, then this should only take place when the North West Relief Road is completed. Just to confirm that there's no planning policy at present that would require that. In the existing SAMDEV, this does refer to proposals on land west of Ellesmere Road would need to be coordinated with the relief road, but that's in the context of policy MD3, which relates to housing, so it wouldn't apply to this particular application. And in the draft local plan currently out to consultation, this does refer to the fact that the proposed housing allocation should not commence until the Northwest Relief Road is operational, but that doesn't relate to any other development which may come along in the interim period. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. I will now open the debate for the to the committee to comment. Please indicate on the chat function if you wish to speak. If the solicitor will let me know who's next to speak. Okay.
First request, Chair, is from Councillor Bardsley.
Thank you, Councillor Bardsley.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Nick Bardsley, Wrighton and Basschurch. Chair, I think you know my views on the matter of site visits and the concerns that I have expressed, I think both formally and certainly informally to you and to officers. This does seem to me to have been a particularly difficult site for members to make a judgment on when we've been denied the opportunity of a site visit, and it is, if I may say so, not very satisfactory that officer views are all based on a, and it's recorded in the report, a very detailed and carefully conducted site visit, but members of this committee, who after all are the decision makers, have not had that opportunity. I'm not looking for an immediate response, but I've got to say personally, it puts me in a very difficult position as to whether I should vote or not, because if I had been there and been able to appreciate some of the points that officers were making, I might well be able to take a settled view on the matter, but we haven't had that opportunity. I know there are reasons why we haven't, but on this particular application, I think a site visit would have been hugely beneficial. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Bardsley. Miranda, anybody else indicated?
Not just currently, Chair. Hold on, let me just scroll. Yes, I beg your pardon. Councillor Dean, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Dean.
Thank you, Councillor Dean, Porthill, Shrewsbury. I think the point that Councillor Phillips makes with regard to disturbance is for me the key one, and I wish perhaps I'd pushed that a little bit more clearly in our previous meeting, because it didn't really come through in our decision. I think, if you're looking at the map, both on the screen here and on my sort of Google Maps, and knowing the topography of the ground, I think the point that a site of how many is it? 10 couples surrounding a field, which is, potentially a mini festival site, frankly, providing, some fairly regular disturbance to the houses effectively below them in the valley is a serious one, and I don't think that that's been addressed in the officers' comments. And I think it's a legitimate reason for opposing this effective change of use away from mostly agricultural to something completely different, because it does to me look a bit like ending up with the risk of an occasional festival very close to you. And I speak from the experience of being the councillor for Porthill, where people in Frankwell frequently have to deal with the noise that comes from, a similar distance from the county ground. So, which is not something I'm against, but people have to live with it. But I just think we have to recognise that the potential disturbance is real. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dean.
Councillor Hunt, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt.
Thank you. Well, clearly my views are not going to have changed a huge amount from the last meeting, where I was for this development. Post COVID, when the world starts getting back to a greater degree of normality, I think Shropshire needs to be open for business. And I think if we become sticks in the mud and we stand still, then that's not going to happen to the greater extent that is going to be needed to support local businesses and kickstart Shropshire's economy again. It is a rural economy, but there are also people that live here. I've never been to a festival, so I can't comment on festivals, but I wouldn't imagine a festival of 20 people would be one that would draw huge crowds from anywhere else or generate huge amounts of noise, I'm afraid. So I'm going to ignore that. I was pro this last time. I am pleased that the applicants seem to have heard what the concerns of other councillors. They've gone quite a long way to addressing those. Obviously, they're not going to completely satisfy them, but I do think in this instance, you know, they've worked really hard to deal that. You know, they've taken out 23% of the application. You know, I obviously supported it before. Had they added 23%, I might not have done, but they haven't. They've taken 23% away. So, you know, I'm going to be supporting this again. I think that developments like this are important. I think they're important for Shrewsbury. I think they're important for Shropshire. So I will be supporting this.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt.
Councillor Vasmer next, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Vasmer.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just first of all, I'd like to back the comments made by Councillor Bardsley. I think this would have benefited the committee if we'd had a site visit. It does seem strange that the officers can go and have a, effectively have a good look round, and the members not allowed to. And maybe we should review that, have a look at this and review this, because I do think it. I mean, there's a number of other applications, for example, where I think it would have benefited members to have had a site visit. So perhaps we could give that some consideration later on. I don't know quite how that might be dealt with, but anyway, on the application itself, I'm still very concerned about this and would support the comments of Councillor Dean. I know the area, and there's kind of it is in the valley and there's an echo effect there, and I do worry that the noise will affect people living nearby, and I think this has been a concern of theirs from the very beginning. So I'm not convinced that this change warrants our support. Thank you.
Thank you. If I can just interject there, I just want to back up Councillor Hunt. I think the ones being taken out were the most visible ones, and that was one of the reasons given. So those have been taken out, so there's not as much visible impact on the area. And I have to try and support any tourism possible in Shropshire, because that's the way forward for our county, I think. But that's just my thoughts at the moment. Okay. Miranda, anybody else?
Yes, Chair. Councillor Aldcroft.
Thank you, Councillor Aldcroft.
Yeah, just coming on this one, I don't think we can assume riotous behaviour or excess noise even before these campsite is completed. And I'm conscious of the fact that trees make a good screen, and they're putting in extra foliage and trees right round the site, as you can see from the map before you. So I think that would minimise any noise that would come, but people would come to a place like this and glamp, not to have a huge party. I don't think. I think they're more to enjoy the countryside, and that's what we do want economically within the county. There was a comment about highways. The highways department are quite happy with the current entrance, and yeah, Ellesmere Road can get busy, but it's not that busy, I don't think. In terms of the development, the 450 odd houses, I've always been told we look at what's before us now. And that doesn't include 450 houses, for all we know that might be scrapped. So I'm discounting that at the moment and just looking at this site, which I think they have moved probably heaven and earth to comply with what the planning department wanted. And obviously it's affected their business plans, but if they can go ahead with this, they can make it work. And after the losses they've probably suffered in through COVID, I would imagine they'll be glad to get it all operational as soon as they can. So I'm afraid I would support what Councillors Hunt and Wynne have said, and I will be voting to approve. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Caldercroft.
No one else indicating so far, Chair.
Thank you very much.
Beg pardon, Councillor Hunt's just appeared on there.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hunt.
Yeah, sorry, I did slip that in just as Miranda was saying that there was nobody else on there. Listen, I've said what I've said. I do understand, and I'm disappointed, like other councillors, that we are not able to do site visits. Officers are professional officers; it's their job. You are allowed to go about your job if you cannot do your job from your office or from your home. They obviously can't. They're planning officers and they have to deal with planning applications. As it stands at the moment, following the Nolan principles, you know, we don't have to go. It would be beneficial for us to go, but we don't have to. I do lament that, but it is what it is. And we should be leading the population of Shropshire by example, and I think that's what we're doing. But I also think it's fair that members mention that, because I think the public should know that you know, we are disappointed that we can't give it everything we've got, but the law at present doesn't allow for it. We're in a spike, and we've got to live as we've got to live. That said, I'm going to move the officers' recommendations for the reasons that I gave earlier.
I'll second it from the chair.
Yeah.
Chair, Councillor Jones has indicated just.
Okay, thank you, Mark.
Yeah, I was going to second it, but the chairman took my words away from me. I think it's a better site now. They've reduced the number on it. I wasn't very happy last month, but I think this has placated some of the worries. I think the plantings of trees will certainly help the noise. I'm not sure I was that bothered about Julian Dean's point about raves happening up there. I don't think that's going to happen in this sort of area. And I think it is good that we've got a tourism site that is near our main county town. We seem to be having lots of tourism that's well out in the country with no facilities and a lot of transport used to get anywhere. Whereas maybe with this, they could technically walk into town or get a bus to there if they wanted to, or even the train. And I think there's one more point I was going to raise, but I can't think what it was at the moment. But yeah, I'm happy to support the site as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Any more speakers, Miranda?
No, I say cautiously, but no, they don't appear to be, Chair.
Okay. So in that case, we'll now take the vote. The solicitor will read out the names of the committee members present entitled to vote and then confirm the results of the votes.
Thank you, Chair. The proposal is for the officer recommendation to grant planning permission. Councillor Aldcroft, are you for or against?
For.
Councillor Bardsley.
Abstain.
Councillor Dakin.
For.
Councillor Dean.
Against.
Councillor Green.
Against.
Councillor Hunt.
For.
Councillor Jones.
For.
Councillor Mosley.
Against.
Councillor Roberts isn't participating. Councillor Wynne.
For.
Councillor Vasma.
Against.
Chair, that is 5-4, 4 against and 1 abstention.
Thank you very much. So that has gone through. It's been passed. Thank you for that, Miranda. Right. Okay. So now we'll move on to item 6. Proposed affordable dwelling, West Vine Cottage, Middleton Road, Middleton, Oswestry. Can the planning officer present this item, please?
Thank you, Chair. I'm Kelvin Hall, Principal Planner. This is an application for the erection of a single plot exception affordable dwelling with garage on land west of Vine Cottage, Middleton Road, Middleton. I will draw your attention to the additional letters. One of these is the formal comments of the Council's affordable housing team, who have confirmed that the applicant meets their requirements for affordable housing in terms of being in housing need and having strong local connections. The other letter is from the applicant's agent, who has provided examples of planning permissions which have been granted for affordable housing in loose-knit settlements. Members should note that each application should be considered on its own individual merits and in relation to its own circumstances. Next slide, please. The site is located in a countryside location near the settlement of Middleton and currently forms part of a large field. Rose Cottage, you can see to the west of the site, just outside the blue line, and the applicant's parents' house, Vine Cottage, is approximately 90 metres to the east. Next slide. This shows the positioning of the bungalow with the detached garage to the west. Vehicle access would be via an existing field access, as shown. Next slide. It would be a 2-bedroom property with a floor area of 100 square metres, which is in line with affordable housing policy. Next slide. These are the elevations. It would have a simple, modest appearance. Officers feel it would be appropriate for the local area with this design. Next slide. This is the garage. It will be a double garage. Amended designs have now been submitted, which have altered the roof slope in line with officer recommendations, and officers feel that this is now acceptable. Next slide. These are the photographs looking west towards the site. The roadside hedge would be retained. There are no objections from the Highways Department regarding the access proposals. If we can go back to an earlier slide, I think it's 19, please. So in summary, officers accept that the applicant has met the criteria for an affordable dwelling and that the bungalow is of an acceptable scale and design. However, it's the officers' views that the proposal is not within or adjacent to a recognised settlement, so therefore it fails to comply with locational policies for affordable dwellings. This is explained in para 6.2.2 of the committee report. The site, as you can see, is in an area where there are scattered properties. It doesn't form part of the settlement of Middleton, and its location doesn't therefore comply with planning policy, and therefore it's recommended for refusal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. Can the solicitor read out any public speaking statements, please?
Chair, the first statement is Councillor Barrow, and she is here to read her own statement out.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Barrow.
Thank you, Chair. I'll start by saying that I support this application. Committee members will be aware that I rarely speak to the committee on applications in my area, but I believe it's important that I do so in this case. The applicants fully meet the criteria for an affordable dwelling, and it ticks all the boxes with the Council's affordable housing officer. I believe the circumstances under which the application is being made overrides policy CS5 of the core strategy and MD07A of SAMDEB and the MPPF. I'd ask you to note also the Parish Council has no objections to this application and it has support from members of the public. As you'll be aware from the report, the applicant's daughter, whom the residence is for, has multiple sclerosis, a disease which is progressive and debilitating. I've seen firsthand the effects of this dreadful disease where sufferers can deteriorate at an alarming rate to the point where in just a few years they are totally dependent on their family for support. Without such support, the young lady concerned, Laura, would be unable to live in her own home. This application would not interfere with any neighbours and the dwelling itself is modest. I know this area very well. What it will do is accommodate a wheelchair and would supply the medical needs of this young lady and enable her to have some independence with the support of her family living next door. I don't believe, knowing the site, that the scale and design are disproportionate and the site can be screened in a way sympathetic to the area. It is a modest 2-bedroom affordable bungalow that will meet the needs of this young lady long term, and it also meets the needs of CS6 and MD2, which seeks to secure sustainable development and design. These are material considerations which I believe make this application a viable one and overrides the policies and frameworks in place. I'll just add, though it has no standing in planning at all and policy, that if this was your daughter, sister or mother, you'd want her to be secure and safe and close at hand. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. Do you have anything else, Miranda?
Yes, Chair. The agent for the application, Nick Williams, has put in a statement and he states, "Good afternoon. The officer report confirms that the applicant meets the criteria to build this affordable home and that the design and scale of the proposed dwelling is suitable, but questions whether the site is within or adjacent to a recognised settlement. It is our belief the site should be considered part of, or at the very least adjacent to, the settlement of Middleton. The Shropshire Council Type and Affordability of Housing SPD requires exception sites to be demonstrably part of or adjacent to a recognisable named settlement. Is Middleton a recognised named settlement? The SPD lists qualifying criteria for a small hamlet or group of houses to be regarded as a recognised named settlement. A settlement always comprises a group of houses occupied by households from different families. The group becomes a settlement due to the number and proximity of the houses in the group. Recognisable settlements are also characterised by how local people refer to them, by a place name that is shared by a number of dwellings. It will usually be named on the Ordnance Survey map. Middleton comprises a group of households from different families, and the cluster of properties along Middleton Road and off adjoining lanes come together to form the settlement, albeit loose-knit in nature. Middleton is recognised as a settlement locally, with residents of the settlement identifying themselves as living in Middleton, and local people beyond Middleton would also identify it as a settlement. Middleton is clearly identifiable on OS mapping and road signs. Middleton should therefore be considered a recognised named settlement as required by policy. Is the site demonstrably part of or adjacent to Middleton? The properties of Middleton are not clustered together but are dispersed in a loose-knit formation. Paragraph 5.17 of the SPD states, because a settlement is a relationship between different properties, the limits of the settlement are defined by where the relationship peters out. This varies from settlement to settlement depending on a number of factors. For example, a site a short distance from a loose-knit settlement may be considered adjoining, while a similar distance in a tightly clustered settlement would not be. This applies in this case. The properties of the settlement are located along Middleton Road and lanes off it. The property is immediately east of Rose Cottage, which has Middleton in its address, and Vine Cottage is located further east of the site and also has Middleton in its address. The centre of Middleton is located southwest of the site. The relationship between the properties of Middleton has not petered out in this location. At the very least, the site should be considered to adjoin the settlement, as a site a short distance from a loose-knit settlement may be considered adjoining, as confirmed by paragraph 517 of the SPD. The above considered the site is demonstrably part of or adjacent to the recognised settlement of Middleton. The application is supported by the parish council, the local member, and 5 additional public comments of support have been received. We do hope the application is today approved to allow Laura to reside in a suitable, affordable dwelling of her own, next to her parents who can provide her the ongoing support she needs. Chair, there are no other public speaking statements.
Thank you very much, Miranda. Can I just make sure everybody's got their microphones muted unless they're speaking? Nick, I'm not sure whether you're muted or not. Councillor Bardsley, just make sure because I get some background noise. Okay, can the planning officer clarify or confirm anything to add?
Kelvin Hall, nothing to add. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Members of the committee, can you now comment, please? The solicitor will indicate who's next to speak.
Chair, firstly, I should just indicate Councillor Roberts has confirmed that he has no disclosable interest in the remaining agenda items because he hadn't actually obviously had a chance to do that. The first person to indicate to speak is Councillor Hunt.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hunt.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Hunt here. This is a very, for me, is a very interesting one. I also know the area because in a different authority many years ago, although that sounds like something out of Star Wars, it was in my area, Middleton, and it was interesting to note what the developer, not the developer, the agent has said, because it can be quite subjective whether it is part of a settlement, whether it isn't part of a settlement. Expanding on that, though, from my point of view, this is a young lady who somewhat is suffering from a medical condition. I think for me, the definition of a settlement is somewhere where there are access to some form of facilities. Obviously, I don't think there is in this case. I don't think it does quite stand up as a settlement. But that said, Kelvin, the planning officer at the beginning, said, you know, each one must be treated on its own individual merit. Now, we're talking about a young lady here who is going to be living in a house that has been specifically designed for her increasing needs, and that's what they're going to be over the next few years, or increasing needs, so that she can be close to her mum and dad, 90 metres away. In this instance, it does strike me that her access to facilities is her mum and dad. So in effect, in a way, they transplant facilities because they are the facilities, because she needs them to access facilities and they already live there. So, you know, I think this is one of those very few applications that I've come across where I think the reason officers have given for refusal based in policy is somewhat rather uniquely almost wrong. And because of that, I am going to move that we go against the officer's recommendations and that we allow this. I've given my reasons for that. Not to mention, going forward into the future, care will be provided by mum and dad, which probably not by the council, which saves us money. But it's not even about that. It is not quite in keeping with the policy, but the policy is there to give us guidance. And I wouldn't like to see a rash of other agents coming forward saying, well, you did it in this case. You know, each application stands on its own, alone. In this instance, I think the right and the humane thing to do is to allow this. I know it probably doesn't stand up quite against policy, but I think in this particular unique instance, I think that the policy needs to bend a bit. So I'm going to move that we go against officers here. I know that doesn't necessarily foot in policy. I'll be interested to hear what other members say, but I am going to move that we go against officers' recommendations and allow. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt.
The next indication is Councillor Vasmer, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Vasmer.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to back Councillor Hunt really and hear what he's just said about this particular application. I mean, I was brought up in a rural area, and I know that where there's easy access to water, settlements can be very dispersed. Historically, that's true. And I think it's you look at two things really. You look at where people identify themselves as living, and secondly, you look at addresses. And I think, as the agent outlined in his submission, that I think you can argue that this area is adjoining a settlement, and so therefore it qualifies on that basis. The other thing is I've looked at the policies which the officers outlined, CS5, SAMDEV 07A, and I think that all of them contain exceptions where there is a need for people to receive support, and whether there is a need as far as disability is concerned. And I think so therefore on both those aspects, I think we should approve this application.
Okay, is that a seconder or not, or is that just a comment?
I'll second, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Vasmir. Any other speakers?
Next speaker, Councillor Bardsley.
Thank you, Councillor Bardsley.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. A slightly similar point to the one that the Vice Chair has made, because it does seem to me that this application complies with all our policies, save in the case officer's view, its location. But the point is, the location is determined entirely by proximity to her parents' existing dwelling. So it does seem to me that we're saying you could put this house somewhere else, but the point is that the application wouldn't have come in if it had been anywhere else. So I very much support Councillor Hunt and Councillor Vasmir. It does seem to me this is, if you like, an exception site, and I think in what policy officers are now calling the emerging local plan, this would probably actually have been recommended for approval. So I would also support approval in this instance.
Thank you, Councillor Bardsley.
Chair, Councillor Green is next to indicate.
Thank you, Councillor Green.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Nat Green, Quarry and Coton Hill. Yes, I mean, following on from those comments already made, I would also like to highlight paragraph 6.1.4, where it says, according to the SPD, type and affordability of housing, rural exception sites are generally required to be within or adjoining. Well, considering this application is, hangs entirely, the result of this application hangs entirely upon the definition of whether it's close to a settlement, I'm afraid that paragraph simply isn't good enough. I wouldn't want to defend that at appeal. And I'd also want to just add my comment that I made at the last meeting, is that I think that this whole area of our SPD really does need looking at. It really does need to be tightened up, because this is time and again we're finding this sort of situation arising, and it is something that we have to deal with, so that we actually have a coherent planning policy for rural development. And I have to say, I will be following the other councillors, and that I will be going against the officer's recommendation in this particular case. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Green.
The next indication is from Councillor Jones, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Jones.
Yes, I agree with the land agent in this case. I live about a mile as the crow flies to Middleton. There's about 10 settlements in Middleton itself, and apart from one, they're all at least 40 metres apart. The only one that's actually near each other is one was a farm that had become, and then there's a barn conversion. So they're quite spread out, and I feel that this would be very much in the settlement. The young lady concerned has got a disability, but she also has raised quite a bit of money in the area for charity. And I've spoken to a couple of the neighbours who think the family are a very good family who've joined the community, and very much this would be an asset to their community. And so I very much support it.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Any more speakers, Miranda?
No, Chair, they don't appear to be.
Oh, thanks very much. Right, we will now take the vote. The solicitor will read out the names of the committee members in turn.
Chair,
Chair,
before you
I
do
just-
that, Chair, you would normally ask if the planning officer or solicitor wish to clarify or confirm anything, and given the recommendation, there will be a couple of points.
Sorry, I apologise for that. Yes, are there any points the planning officer or solicitor wish to clarify? Sorry, Miranda.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Kelvin Hall. Yeah, I've noted all the points that have been made by members. I just wanted to pick up on one that Councillor Green made, and just wanted to provide clarification. In the report, it does refer to in 6.1.4 in relation to sites requiring to be generally required to be within or joining a recognisable named settlement. I think the actual SPD on the type and affordability of housing does state that exception sites must be demonstrably part of or adjacent to a recognisable named settlement. So that does give a bit more strength there. It also says that sites that do not lie within a settlement are not considered to be acceptable. That was just the point of clarification I wanted to make there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Calvin. Miranda, have you got any points you want to bring up?
Yes, Chair, there's a couple of points before this is put to the vote. Firstly, with the proposal, that would need to be a proposal for approval subject to the standard conditions that would need to go on a dwelling of this nature. I think the planning officer could just run through the brief nature of those so that it's clear before the vote is taken, and also there would need to be a section 106 agreement for this to remain affordable in perpetuity. And finally, we do need, because the officer report was recommending refusal and members are proposing something different, just to be clear on the reasons for that proposal. So although I've heard a number of things from the debate, I think we just need to be clear exactly what the basis of that vote is. The local member did not in her submission indicate that in fact she was taking the view that this was within the settlement. A couple of members have suggested that they would accept what the agent says about it being within the settlement of Middleton. Others have focused on the specific needs of the applicant and the need for this to be near to her parents. So there are two approaches to this, Chair. I think we need some clarity from the proposer so that we know what the reason for the decision is. One is that taking account of what's before you, you take the view it is within the settlement of Middleton because it's said to be a looser knit settlement, and therefore you think it complies with policy, or you don't necessarily take that view, but you think that nevertheless there are material considerations in terms of the locational need for the applicant to be near to her parents here, and that therefore rather exceptionally means that notwithstanding it not being clearly and demonstrably in the settlement of Middleton, that you would nevertheless approve it in this case. So I suppose you could characterise that as an exception to the exception policy, really. So I think we just need some clarity as to the reason for the proposal so that we have that clear.
Okay, I'm going to go to Vince first. Can you clarify, Vince, please?
I can. I'm not necessarily sure, being very conscious of that area, as I said before, from a former authority, that it does necessarily meet policy, although that is debatable, as I said. I think the word I used, Miranda, was uniquely as opposed to exceptionally. I think this is quite a unique application, so to me it would be a uniquely an exception to an exception, and I think that's a good enough reason for this to go through. This young lady needs help. That help is here. Her access to shops and medical and everything else is through her parents, and her parents live 90 meters away. So I think that's what makes this unique, as I said in my obviously quite rambling discussion at the beginning. So that's the reasons that I think that we should accept this. I am of course keen that a house that is disabled friendly should remain in perpetuity a house social housing. of that nature, and I am prepared to take all the usual conditions on from planning officers. Is that what you were looking for, Miranda?
That is, so I think, to be clear, Chair, through you, in planning terms, what the proposer is saying, that, well, he's not directly saying it meets all of planning policy, that there are material considerations that means this should nevertheless be granted, and he's articulated what those are.
Thank you. Can I just
Miranda,
come back to second? Councillor Vesmere, are you happy with that?
Yes, I think you can argue that it's adjacent to a recognised settlement, but nevertheless, I'm willing to accept Councillor Hunt's view on this for sake of clarity.
Thank you, Councillor Vesmere. Okay. Just going back to the officer now, planning officer, would you like to clarify any points, any more points?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm happy to run through proposed conditions that officers would recommend imposing if members are seeking to approve the application. Could you please?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Well, as referred to, it will be a requirement under policy that a Section 106 agreement is entered into to secure the dwelling as an affordable unit in perpetuity. There are standard conditions relating to implementation and the development undertaken in accordance with the approved plans. We will be seeking prior approval of the materials, external materials to be used, and for surface and foul water drainage measures. In line with policy as well, we would be seeking to remove permitted development rights for the property, also requiring that the garage is not used for living accommodation, and also that the roadside hedgerow is retained. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that. So
happy with all of those, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hunt. Miranda, are we happy with that?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Do you wish me to now put that to the vote?
If you would please, yes.
Thank you, Chair. Members, this is a proposal to approve the recommendations, to approve the application against the officer's recommendation, as you have heard, for the reasons you've heard, with the conditions you've heard. Councillor Aldcroft, are you for or against?
I'm for.
Councillor Bardsley?
For.
Councillor Dakin?
For.
Councillor Dean?
For.
Councillor Green?
For.
Councillor Hunt?
For.
Councillor Jones?
For.
Councillor Mosley?
For.
Councillor Roberts?
For.
Councillor Vasmer?
For.
And Councillor Wynne?
For.
Chair, that is unanimous.
Thank you very much. So that has been passed against the officer's recommendation. Right, now we'll move on to item 7, proposed dwelling to west of 14 Ellesmere Road, Tetchell. Can the planning officer present this, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Philip Mullen, Principal Planner, presenting this application. This application proposes erection of one dwelling and realignment of private access drive and all associated works on land to the west of Ellesmere Road, Tetchell. Members' attention is drawn to the update sheet and the one further letter of representation received. You'll note there's an officer comment underneath this. Officers consider no further issues raised, and issues that are raised will be addressed also in my presentation. Can we have the slides up now, please? The first slide. The application site is outlined in red, and note the site area in relation to the surrounding built environment, with the site located within the built-up form of the settlement concerned and within the recognised development boundary. The relevant policy in relation to this Sandair policy in relation to this settlement does allow residential development within the settlement boundary, such as infilling. In fact, it does actually refer to infilling. Officers consider this site is an infill site. Next slide, please. Application proposes a two-storey dwelling with 3 bedrooms on the first floor, albeit one indicated as a study. These are the 2 floors. It's a small cottage-style dwelling. If we go to the next slide, please, which shows the elevations. As you can see, it's a modest cottage over 2 stories, using the roof space for the bedroom accommodation. Next slide, please. This slide indicates a contextual street scene, indicating the proposed dwelling in relation to the surrounding built environment. Also note the block plan, which is included on this slide, indicating the floor area of the proposed dwelling, which officers consider will sit comfortably within the plot, with proposed access road to the right-hand side. Either side of the proposed dwelling, there will be 1.3 meters to one side and 1.7 meters the other side to the site boundary, in a plot measuring 7.4 meters wide and 9.7 meters long, which will provide adequate car parking and amenity space for occupiers of the said dwelling. I'd like to also please note the terrace to the one side where this cottage has taken the lead from, and also a pair of cottages the other side. Next slide, please. This indicates a photograph of the site, indicating the dwellings either side. The access you can see in front of you is the access to the cottage, the red brick cottage, and road going further on. The site itself is where the diggers are. Unfortunately, when the officer was out in sight, this road was closed owing to roadworks in front of the site. Next slide, please. This is a photograph looking into the plot, and with the where the excavation works are taking place, where the realignment of the road will be, the dwelling to be built to the side over the existing road. You'll note there's recent development to the rear of the site, and the cottage to the one side. Owing to local concerns, I asked the second case officer to visit the site this morning, and he has reported back that in his opinion the highway works are acceptable and overall an improvement on current circumstances with regards highway access. It is noted that the council's highways manager has raised no objections to this application, and neither did he to previous applications on site, which I want to touch on now. But before I do, while it is not acknowledged the local parish council object to the proposed development for reasons as outlined in section 4 of the report, along with the local member and a number of members of the public, there are no objections from any of the statutory consultees, and this includes Shropshire Council Highways. Members' attention is drawn to the further letter of representation as indicated on the update sheet. And it is noted concerns have been made with regard to the planning history of this site. I want to make it clear, a previous planning application referenced for variation in order to relocate the access road leading to residential development to the rear of the site was refused in accordance with the council scheme of delegation, as it was not considered to be acceptable in relation to the context of the overall street scene, with no material benefits to surrounding amenity and highway safety. The case officer, who happened to be the same officer as to the current application, did refer in a report to a potential dwelling on site and how this would be considered to be shoehorned into the site and would represent an odd island effect. This section of the report, referring to a potential dwelling, was copied from a previous application on site, which was made in outline 1805405 for its exact reference number. Sorry, there's a low flying aeroplane going over. For a dwelling on site that was subsequently withdrawn, and the application this particular application did have a different case officer who has since left the employment of Shropshire Council. I must make it clear that this application, although in outline, did have an indicative plan with it, which indicated a dwelling larger in scale than the dwelling now proposed. And indeed, the current application has been amended as a result of officer concerns with regards to scale. As such, it is considered that the previous concerns about a potential dwelling on site have now been addressed with the amended plans received in support of this application. It is noted concerns have also been raised with regards to boundary treatments, and particularly in the letter I referred to on the update sheet. It is recommended that an additional condition is attached to any approval notice if members are mindful to grant permission with regards to boundary treatment details, and this is particularly relevant on the left-hand side of the site. I appreciate there was hedgerow on site, and that's no longer in place, having been ripped out, I understand, some time ago. In conclusion, on balance, with consideration to the amended plans received, which now indicate a small 2-storey, 3-bedroomed cottage-style dwelling, officers consider this will blend in with the surrounding street scene. The plot represented an infill plot with a dwelling of suitable scale and mass in relation to the surrounding built environment. The recommendation is therefore one of approval, subject to conditions as outlined in Appendix 1 attached to the report, and the additional condition as I referred to with regards to boundary treatment. Also, I'd like to point out with regards to the withdrawn application, concerns raised regards to information submitted in support of the application, and the larger floor area, and the issue with regards the removal of the hedge. This is an issue of concern. However, members need to focus on the application that is before us today. That, Mr. Chairman, concludes my presentation on this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Philip. Can I list to read out any public speaking statements, please?
Thank you, Chair. The first statement we have is from Councillor Steve Davenport, but on behalf of Ellesmere Rural Parish Council, hence I'm reading it as it's on behalf of the Parish Council, and he states, I'm sending this in as a parish councillor. I've been advised that I'm not allowed to speak on this application. Not often I have to do this, and only doing so out of sheer frustration about the recommendation to approve the application, as there is a huge swell of anger from the parish council and residents alike. Fact, the original application had been approved on a condition the road ran alongside the hedge for 3 houses and approved. All okay so far. Then a resubmission to move the road under another guise, and then a house to be built in that original space where it was agreed in the original application the road would be. This is playing with planning rules and law, not to mention people's feelings and to totally disregard to the parish council's advice. This is overdevelopment, and SC Planning Department have refused this, so what's changed? Keep on doing so and respect local people, Shropshire councillors and parish councillors. SC Planning Department only take notice of the PC when it suits them to do so. I've got many examples of this over my years involved with planning. There are other things that have been said, but I won't in public mention them as I'm sure it is a legal matter. I urge you to do the right thing and refuse this in a small village where one property would make a huge difference. If any more building were to take place, it needs to be on the edge of the village, not on a corner where speed of traffic is awful, mainly due to the workforce at ABP. Save lives in Tetchell, say no. That's the end of that statement, Chair. The next statement is from Councillor Brian Williams, is the local member who is in the meeting in order to read his own statement out, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Williams.
Hello, thank you, Chair. Like my colleague Steve Davenport, I speak in opposition to this particular application, but I would prefer that the committee refers this back to the planning officers for further information to be included, and for the conclusion then, the recommendation to be based on that further information. Let me explain. Early last year, the applicant submitted application before you today on he submitted application 20-00582 on his own behalf, which contains a proposal for a dwelling on the identical plot to the one which is the subject of the current application. In relation to the potential dwelling, the case officer's report stated as follows. Item 642, potential dwelling. The plot measures 11 metres in width and extends from the adjacent highway in a rectangular shape. Due to the already approved development at the rear of the site, the plot would be completely bounded by access and highway arrangements, namely the C-classified Ellesmere Road to the front, the access to Eaton Court to the west, and the access to the 3 dwellings to the east and rear of the site. Therefore, though the plot is considered to be a suitable site on paper, in practice to locate a dwelling here would result in an odd island effect. 643. This, when coupled with the likelihood that a dwelling providing any adequate internal amenity space would appear as a shoehorned addition between the neighbouring properties, would result in a cramped appearance and to an undesirable form of contrived development which would be out of keeping with the character and built form of the surrounding area. Now that was pretty damning and conclusive, wasn't it? So the application was refused. We've now got an application before you on exactly the same site, exactly the same size of site, no greater, exactly the same size. Subsequently, the applicant, instead of submitting an application on his own behalf, appointed Halls as his agent, and the application before you today has been prepared by one of their staff, Mr. Ollie Thomas. The same case officer in planning who wrote the report quoted above, recommending refusal, has written the report which is before the committee today. The plot, as I've said, is exactly the same size as that which was rejected in the previous application, but in the current report, all reference to the unsuitability of the plot because of its odd island effect or being shoehorned in between other neighbouring properties, all that has been omitted. The officer concentrates on the cosmetic amendments to the dwelling from the original proposals to make that the justification for recommending approval to you today. Now, I have to say, the photographs that have been before you give no real indication of the minimal area of the site. Indeed, they don't actually show the area where the house is to be built. What they're showing you at the moment is where the road goes in, and the house's plot is on the left-hand side out of the photograph, which is on the screen before you. I would ask the committee to defer this application today and to instruct the planning officer to redraft the report to include all the remarks made about the plot size and location in the original report, which have been omitted in the report today. With all the information before them, and with whatever recommendation the officer deems appropriate, taking all issues into account, the committee can then make an appropriate decision. I would also ask that the application be deferred until such time as the access road has been completed, with curbs and footpaths, which are essential to appreciating the minimal size of the application site. I have to say that this is a site where it would be extremely helpful for the committee to be able to make a site visit when circumstances allow, which would lead to a beneficial understanding of the site. There are inconsistencies which have unfortunately led to suspicious speculation among the residents of Tetchell and their parish council representatives, and this can only be laid to rest by the committee having full consideration of all the matters relating to the plot and its size. Such is the strength of the feeling that material planning considerations have been omitted from the current report, that a judicial review could be a strong possibility by the residents of Tetchell if approval is given to the application on the basis of the report before you today. I suggest that it is essential for the integrity of the planning process that the report be rewritten to contain all the relevant information before you are asked to make your decision. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Williams.
Chair, can I?
Yeah. I was going to
Could
say.
I've asked the committee clerk, could you please, for members' clarity, go back to the block plan showing the plot in relation to the surrounding area there? Thank you.
Chair, there is further public speaker statement.
Oh, right, we better, Philip, before we do that, can we have the public speaker statements, please?
Yes, Chair, the next statement is in favour of the application from the agent, Ollie Thomas, and he states, this application is seeking full planning permission for the erection of a modest dwelling with adequate parking provisions and located centrally within the settlement of Tetchell and wholly within its development boundary. Additionally, the application is seeking to realign an existing private driveway that serves a handful of new build dwellings to the rear of the site. We and others are fully aware that the wider site has planning history. Nonetheless, the planning system fully allows for a development scheme to be varied, either prior to commencement or at any time during its lifetime. On this basis, while the planning history is material to this application must first be determined on its own merits, to which this application has received support from the planning officer and technical specialists alike on its own merits. Whilst there appears to be an amount of objection from the parish council and local member, this application must not be swayed on personal frustration or relationships of individuals as has been provided, whether for good or bad. The planning officer has confirmed that this application on both parts is in full compliance with the local development plan. The planning officer in her report has considered all considerations material to this application and concluded that the application is both sustainable and in complete accordance with those relevant local development plan policies. Any third party's ability to challenge a decision made is always apparent. The local member's mention of challenge by way of judicial review should not cloud any judgment made. The proposed dwelling is a modest two-storey dwelling that occupies an infill plot along the street scene with Ellesmere Road. The design and appearance of the dwelling is sympathetic and has been amended in line with the planning officer's requests. Tetchell is a settlement of complete variance where there is no one single prevalent character or form of which must be applied across new development. The dwelling sits comfortably within its plot, of which is able to provide adequate parking and amenity provisions commensurate with both the local development plan and the existing built pattern and settlement characteristics. In terms of the planning history, whilst there has been a recent refusal for the access realignment within which it was mentioned that the resultant space would be unsuitable for a new dwelling, this application has been submitted in full with all details submitted. The accompanying plans and details have been able to allay those previous concerns laid out by the planning officer. This is not uncommon, and had the previous application been submitted in full, it is likely that this application would not have been needed. Throughout both this application and the previous, the Council's Highways Authority have continually made no objection to the application, as the proposed realignment would not worsen highways conditions. It is important to note that the applications can only be refused on highway grounds if it represent an unacceptable impact on highway safety. This is not the case in this application, as confirmed with the applicant's highways consultant, the Council's Highways Authority and the Planning Officer. On the above basis and in line with the Planning Officer's recommendation, it is respectfully requested that members resolve to grant planning permission. Chair, that is the final of the public speaking statements.
Thank you very much, Miranda. Philip, before you go come in, can you just have clarification on any photographs you've got of the plot? Because I thought the photograph, page 32, was the plot. So which exactly is the plot and have we got a photograph of it, please?
Right. That photograph there is where the new road is going in, where the existing road is to the your left-hand side, is over which the dwelling is going to be proposed to be built. I asked the committee clerk to put the block plan up solely for that reason, so that you had a better understanding of the layout in relation to the surrounding environment, because that shows the existing dwellings either side and the space between them. It also indicates the dwelling plot itself and how the dwelling will sit within the plot, with the distance either side. And in response to the local members' concerns about the application, he has indeed correctly quoted a passage from a previous report. I have covered this in my presentation.
Right. And would you like to clarify anything else, Philip?
I only to reconfirm what I said during my presentation with regards to the previous history of the site. He is quite right. In fact, the original planning officer for the withdrawn application was Mr. Ollie Thomas, who is, as everybody will be aware, is no longer working for the authority, is now working in the private sector. And it was from his report that the current case officer took her quote with regards scale. However, that application was an outline application which showed a different floor plan indicative to this one. And the case, obviously, being a former case officer to the application, and the agent is fully aware of the situation here. And in my opinion, he has quite rightly addressed that in his presentation today to committee with regards to this application. Officers are of the opinion that the current application does propose a dwelling of satisfactory scale and design in relation to the surrounding built environment, in that it's more modest than proposals to the previous outline application that was subsequently withdrawn just before we were due to issue the decision notice. And that report is what the current case officer referred to in a subsequent application for variation of the condition with regards to the access road.
Right.
However, this is a full application under consideration today, so a fresh application which has to be considered on the merits, planning merits, as in the application. So
it was always going to be a case that they were going to change the line of the road with or without this build, yeah?
Yes.
Okay. Just
because we had concerns about why they wanted to and what was there was no justification in alignment of the road. Although the highways officer did not raise any objections, we couldn't see any planning gain. And and it indicated a dwelling that was not of acceptable scale, indicative, as I said previously. So we could, under the scheme of delegation, we refused the application. It's my belief, or rather it's officers' belief, that all those matters have now been addressed in the current application before you today.
Thank you. Miranda, would you like to add anything?
Not at this stage, Chair.
Thank you very much. Right, members of the committee, can you make comments, please? The solicitor will indicate who's to speak next.
The first indication, Chair, is Councillor Vasmer.
Okay, Councillor Vasmer.
Yeah, so I'd just like to ask whether the highways office has considered pavements and within this application. It seems quite tight here, and it's obviously appears to be at the centre of the village. And again, I'd emphasise it would have been useful to have a site visit or some sort of more local information, really, more local views from photographs. But I just worry that we've got a site at the centre of the village, but there seems to be no consideration of people using pavements, and I presume that's because that's not a consideration which is particularly relevant in this case. I'd be interested in some advice on that.
Okay, do we have the highways officer here, Philip?
I'm not aware. I am not aware of him being here, but okay. In response to Councillor Vasmer's comments, I'd like to draw members' attention to the highway response in section 4 of the report. And although he doesn't specifically cover pavement detail, he does indicate that there are no sustainable highway grounds upon which to base an objection to this application. Maybe perhaps we can go back to photographs for members
Chair, if I could just interject.
Scene does look like, please.
Hang on, Philip. Thank you, Miranda.
Chair, it's Miranda. I believe the highways officer is present, actually.
All right. Could we have some comments from the highways officer then, please?
Thank you, Chair. This is Mark Wootton here, the Shropshire Highways. Obviously, I've had a look. It's an application that predominantly is being dealt with by WSPL consultants, as is the case with a number of the other applications which have been carried out on this site. Essentially, from the highways perspective, whilst this is an application for a single dwelling, quite clearly this is, yes, it's an application for a single dwelling, but in essence also it is moving the access road, which is to serve the 3 houses which have been permitted planning permission previously. So in essence, therefore, we're talking about an access road that will serve 4 properties. In relation to the comment of Councillor Vasmer and about the footpath, in actual fact, in myself looking back at the planning history on this site and going back to the 2017 application, the Reserve Matters application, that is, a footpath was proposed along the site road frontage. Which was obviously the application approved to serve the 3 new dwellings at that particular time. The current application, however, does not show a footpath along the site road frontage, and I think there's no justification why that has been removed from the scheme, and I suggest that it is reimposed into the development as part of any consent that is granted.
Right.
Just to put it in context also, Chair, in terms of the access road, effectively in terms of the centre line of the former positioning to the rear line position, I think is something like 5 metres. On other site visits last week, did go to the site. At that time, you can see from the photographs that have already been shown to you, there is some drainage works carried on in connection with the site. But ultimately, my view is that the relocation of the access has not had a detrimental impact on the previous access that has been approved already by members.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Chair, for the time being.
Thank you. Just don't rush away just in case. Thank you, Mark. Okay, Philip, I'll come back to you now. Have you got any more points you'd like to raise?
No, I've got no further comment. I've only covered what officers have been advised from the Shropshire Council Highways Manager.
Okay, that's great. So now, right, we'll open up the debate. So, yeah, we were just about, well, we were halfway through it. So, yes, Miranda.
Next indication is Councillor Dakin, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dakin. Are you on Mute Gerald.
Yeah, I'm trying to find my mouse. Okay, got it now.
Okay.
If this application was coming to me now without the history, I think I'd be quite happy with it. It appears to have a lot of history against it, but from what I've seen of it there, I think this application looks to me to be fine. I think it's the history that's blocking it a bit. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Next, Miranda.
Next is Councillor Bardsley.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I would like to take up the suggestion that the local member made. I live pretty close to Tetchell, but I'm not familiar with this particular bit of Tetchell. You know, I don't want to reopen the debate about site visits, but you know, here clearly is a place that we should have gone to see. The photographs, you know, I appreciate the practical difficulties of taking them, but it is actually extremely difficult if you don't know the area as well as Councillor Williams does to appreciate what is being proposed and whether it's reasonable or not. So it does seem to me that Councillor Brian Williams' suggestion that this is deferred and resubmitted, well, for a start, with much better photographs. I mean, I don't think a single one shows actually the site on which the application is taking place. From what Councillor Williams said, it is to the left of the photograph number 32 on the slides. So we're not actually quite seeing the application site. I mean, it seems extraordinary to me. We can't have a site visit, and actually the photographs don't show what it is we're being asked to approve. So it does seem to me that Councillor Williams' suggestion is a very sensible one. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bardsley.
Next indication, Councillor Hunt, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hunt.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think it could be six or 9 or 12 months even before we can do site visits. I'm not too unhappy. I think slide 32 there shows very clearly the application site. There's one of them pointy things that they used to make me wear on my head when I was at school, and then there's the application site behind it. The other picture coming into the corner, although there's some roadworks there, I think clearly shows the concept of the island, in that you've got what looks to be like a bus stop there, and then there's the White House and the entrance beyond it, and then you've got a fence there, which is the other road that goes up, which are clearly shown on the site plan. So I understand both the photographs. It's not particularly clear on that one, but if you look long enough and hard enough, you can work it out. I am inclined, I'm afraid, to agree with what Councillor Dakin has said. If we weren't mired in the history behind this and all the scrapping and fighting, I think if we looked at this as we are indeed required to, as a single application without everything behind it, I think it's probably one that we would approve. I am not going to make a recommendation yet, but I'm afraid at the moment minded to approve this. It would be interesting to know what officers think about the concept of a deferment. I don't think it's likely that there's going to be any time soon that we could do a site visit, and that being the case, my assumption is we would therefore be at risk of non-determination, but there are those who know better than me that will surely comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt. Anybody else, Miranda?
Councillor Jones.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jones.
Yeah, I go through Tetchell quite often. We've got some land the other side of Tetchell, and I don't see a problem with this. I take a little bit of umbrage with Steve Davenport saying ABP lorries are coming through the village. Well, they don't come through the village. I've never seen one. They're not supposed to go through that way anyway. The traffic going through the village is quite slow because there's a 90-degree bend at each end of it. I wouldn't say Tetchell's the most beautiful village I've ever been. There's a mishmash of styles of houses, and I don't think this is going to be any different to that, and I don't think there's going to be a problem with it. So I'd support it.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Anybody else indicated, Miranda?
No, Chair, there isn't at this present stage. I don't think. I'm just scroll. No.
Right.
Can I just ask, Chair? Sorry, was that a proposal from Councillor Jones, or?
No, we haven't had a proposal yet. I was about to ask for one in a second, actually, Vince, but I just wanted to ask if any clarification from the planning officer or the solicitor with all debate being done.
Chair, through you, there's just a couple of points. The question of deferring was raised, but I think Councillor Hunt then said, well, he didn't know how long the deferral would be. I know the deferral suggested by the local member, but I think what Councillor Bardsley was suggesting was a deferral for better or more photographs, as he put it, rather than an open-ended deferral for a site visit. So he wasn't quite taking up a sort of deferral for that reason. And then the other mention that Councillor Hunt made in terms of it being the history, but that's the issue here, but not required to take that into account. I should just make it clear to members that the history is relevant, and you have been referred to a previous report that raised criticisms of this site. And there is the principle, while you're not bound by what's gone on in the past and you take each site on its merits, there is the principle of consistency to consider. However, you have heard from the planning officer presenting the application to you today in terms of why the planning officers are not taking that position now, in terms of the information they now have before them to look, and therefore members have before them, in the terms of what is proposed and the style, size, etc. of the dwelling, which wasn't before them before. So the issue of that consistency point, I think, has been addressed before you today. So I think that would be the point I would make, Chair. There's been additional indications now. The Highways officer has just asked if he could make an update, and then following that, Councillors Hunt and then Bardsley.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Mark.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to raise a point about the because the access road is relocated slightly more towards Longacres, the existing property. That visibility to the display to the left as you would come out of the site access is obviously quite critical. I've looked at the application details, and it does indicate that all the area required for visibility is either in the ownership or control of the applicant, or falls within the highway. Well, principally, I think it's either in the control of the applicant or the ownership of Longacres, or the control, rather, should I say. So in terms of a planning condition, I would just, based on what's been previously recommended by WSP as a planning condition, I think that needs to be changed to a pre-commencement condition to ensure that visibility display is implemented before they actually commence development. Because, as I say, that this access road will not only serve this new dwelling, it will be serving the 3 additional dwellings which have already got consent. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Mark. Could you make a note of that, please, Miranda? Okay, where are we? Yeah, thank you. So where are we now? We just want clarification, don't we? Anything to add?
You've got requests from Councillors Hunt, Bardsley, and then Vasma.
Okay, Councillor Hunt first, please. You're on mute, Vince.
Some would say that's a good thing. I'm going to move the officer's recommendation, and that said, taking on board what Mark Wooten has just said about sorting out that visibility display before commencement. I don't disagree with that. There are 3 houses on that road already with vehicles coming in and out, so to have and maintain that actually then, as far as I'm concerned, becomes a highways improvement. So yeah, I'm happy to move that with that on board. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Vince. Councillor Bardsley.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, I may not get any support, but can I move an amendment which would be to support Councillor Williams as local member for a deferral, not an indefinite one? And I'm sorry if I gave the impression that I was looking for a site visit, but I do think more information and certainly better photographs would make a considerable difference and would assist decision making. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Vazmir.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd like to second Councillor Bardsley's amendment, and also note that it would be useful to have more information from the Highways Officer regarding footpaths.
Thank you. Any other speakers, Miranda?
No, Chair. Chair,
Right.
you've got a proposal that wasn't yet to approve. That wasn't.
I'll second that. I'll second that. Gerald Aiken.
Gerald Aiken, second. Vincent's proposed.
Okay. So but you've also got a proposal to defer. Now, it was described to you by Councillor Bardsley as an amendment. Well, it isn't really an amendment to an approval proposal, so it's a different proposal, but that was the first proposal that was proposed and seconded. So you would take that one first, yes, Chair.
Okay, so right, what's in front of us now? If there's no more speakers, we shall go to the vote on the amendment. Now, the proposal from Councillor Bardsley, seconded by Councillor Vazmir, for a deferral. So, Amanda, could you just make sure everybody's clear on that, please, and we'll go for the vote.
So the proposal is to defer the application for better photographs and some more photographs of the site and some more information around the pavements, footpaths that the Highways Officer referred to. So if that's the proposal, I will take the vote. So can you indicate, Councillor Aldcroft, are you for or against?
Against.
Councillor Bardsley?
For.
Councillor Dakin?
Against.
Councillor Dean?
Against.
Councillor Green?
Against.
Councillor Hunt?
Against.
Councillor Jones?
Against.
Councillor Mosley?
Against.
Councillor Roberts?
For.
Councillor Vazmir?
For.
Councillor Wynne?
Against.
So, Chair, you have 8 against that and 3 for, so that falls. You now have a proposal in support of the officer recommendation that has been proposed and seconded. There was with the condition regarding pre-commencement condition regarding the visibility displays. You did hear earlier on from the Highways Officer around pavements that were suggested on a previous application and that they should be included in this. They don't appear to be referred to in the conditions, but the proposer might want some clarity on that point.
Yes, I'm not sure what clarity I could seek at the moment for this to go in, Miranda, unless it was conditioned that the footpaths for the earlier consent were still put in. Could that be conditioned?
Can I?
Please, Philip.
Could I suggest that that aspect is delegated to the case officer in conjunction with the highways manager to put in the condition in the spirit of how you suggested during the debate today?
Yeah,
I'm happy to take that on board. I didn't see any other footpaths anywhere anyway, so.
No.
Councillor Dakin, are you happy with that?
Yes, I'm happy with that. And also, because it's possible to put in, take away permitted development rights.
Can I, to you, Chair?
Yeah.
We have recommended condition number 5 in the Appendix 1, removal of permitted development rights. I also need to remind you of the suggested condition I made during my presentation with regards boundary treatment, because there's been a hedge removed and concerns raised about that, but that again was part of the previous planning history. However, I think it is relevant to this site that we have in the central village location satisfactory boundary treatment.
I'm also happy to take that one on board and defer that to officers as well.
Okay, happy with that, Gerald?
Yes, happy with that.
Okay. So, all right, we can go to the vote now. Thank you, Miranda.
Chair. So the delegation in terms of the the visibility displays and the pavements would need to be delegated to officers, because there are two conditions that are referred to as being prior to occupation. So certainly the visibility display would need amending to being pre-commencement. So conditions 3 and 4 may need amending to accommodate that part of the recommendation. Otherwise, it's a recommendation for approval with the additional condition regarding boundary treatment. And I will ask now if you are for or against, members. Councillor Aldcroft.
For.
Councillor Bardsley.
Against.
Councillor Dakin.
For.
Councillor Dean.
For.
Councillor Green.
For.
Councillor Hunt.
For.
Councillor Jones.
For.
Councillor Mosley.
For.
Councillor Roberts.
Against.
Councillor Vasma.
Against.
And Councillor Wynne.
For.
Okay, Chair, that is 8 in favour and 3 against.
Okay, so that has been passed, the officer's recommendation. Thank you very much. Okay, now we can move on to item 8.
Chair, if I can just interject.
Sorry?
It's Roy Aldcroft,
Oh, hi, Roy.
representing Market Drayton East and War. I didn't have time to present a written statement, read this application, so as the local councillor, I shall leave the meeting while members discuss.
Thank you very much, Roy. Okie doke. Right, item 8, land adjacent to Warren Heights, London Road, War. Can the planning officer present this, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Philip Mullen, presenting this application. Application proposes installation of access gates, formation of visibility displays, boundary wall with landscaping detail on land adjacent to Warren Heights, London Road, War, and represents a modification to a previous approval for the site. The application site is in relation to a dwelling under construction and close to completion alongside London Road. I understand occupation of the dwelling has very recently been taken up. If we can go to slides, please. Application site is as outlined in red, indicating both sites presently under construction with the dwellings. This dwelling was part of a previous approval for construction of 2 new dwellings along London Road on the edge of War. Application site is, as I said, outlined in red, and it's the dwelling subject to this application is the one to the left-hand side, and the plot indicates the proposed an entrance wall and gates entirely alongside this plot, and a section of the joining plot to the right. You'll see on the location plan indication of the 2 dwellings. However, this shows a wall which was subsequently amended during the planning consideration of this application, as they wanted to build full walls, which officers didn't think was acceptable in relation to the surrounding street character. The remaining boundaries to the wall are to remain as approved hedgerows, and this application refers to the road frontage only. Alongside which is proposed to construct a 1 metre high brick wall, along with pillars 1.5 metres high and entrance gates, with an internal hedge planted alongside the wall on the internal boundary. As I've indicated, amended plans were received during the construction during the application processing as a result of officer concerns that the plans as originally submitted were not considered appropriate for this semi-rural location. You'll see on the diagram there on the plan in front of you the wall as they originally wanted it. Is there another slide, please? There's the plan indicating the revised with a lower wall and the green indicating a hedgerow inside. The application is before committee owing to objections from the local parish council as outlined in paragraph 4.12 of the officer report. Concerns have been raised with regards to timber fencing installation. It was indicated that this was only a temporary matter and whistle enforcement has not been carried out on this matter by the council. It must be noted that part of enforcement procedure in situations considered appropriate is to invite an informal application to try and remedy the matter. This is what has occurred in this instance. In conclusion, officers consider on balance the proposal to be acceptable, and it is noticed a hedge is retained within the wall and that all other boundaries remain as originally approved. Therefore, the recommendation is one of approval, subject to conditions as set out in Appendix 1 attached to the report. That concludes my presentation, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Philip. Can the solicitor to read out any public speaking statements, please?
Thank you, Chair. There is one from War Parish Council, and they state, War Parish Council objects to the above planning application and wish to reiterate its reasoning as follows. In the Development Manager's report, item 8, the case officer states in conclusion 7.0, as such, the proposal is in accordance with the War Neighbourhood Plan, the MPPF, policies CS6 of the Shropshire Core Strategy and MD2 of the SAMDEV Plan. This statement is incorrect in that the proposal does not comply with the War Neighbourhood Plan 2016 to 2036. We wish to reaffirm our original comments as follows. Objectives in Section 5. Developments will be sensitively located and designed to ensure that the cherished natural environment and rural character of the parish is maintained. The planning application is also not in line with Policy HOU2 for housing development. It states housing developments within the settlements of War, Islands Cross and Pipegate will be supported where they have regard to the following. A. Do not adversely affect local landscape character and visual amenity. Policy HOU3 Design. New housing development will be supported where they have regard to the following. A. Where adjoining open countryside, they should provide a sympathetic built to unbuilt area transition. B. The topography and natural features of the site should maximise significant views from the site to the surrounding countryside and minimise impact on the skyline. C. Minimise adverse impacts on the amenity of future or adjacent property by reason of overshadowing, overlooking, visual intrusion, noise and disturbance, odour, or in any other way. F. Respect the character of the locality and the local vernacular and contribute positively to local distinctiveness. H. Development should support features beneficial to wildlife where appropriate. I. Development should incorporate a native British mix of plants within their landscaping. We request that the Northern Planning Committee take into consideration the War Neighbourhood Plan 2016 to 2036 on the above policies and objectives, that they support these and that this application is refused. The local member of Shropshire Council, Councillor Roy Oldcroft, also submitted a comment against the original application on 11th of November 2020, referring to Shropshire Council's green policies and supporting the views of War Parish Council in that hedgerows should be retained and assist with improvement of air quality as well as provide wildlife and bird habitat. We also refer for your consideration regarding planning application 1702051 REM pursuant to permission 1401692 OUT Appendix 1 conditions. Conditions that require approval during construction prior to occupation of the development. Item 3. The setting back of the new hedge 1 metre into the site behind the existing hedge line as shown on drawing number 2966-03 Rev C shall be provided in accordance with the approved details. All growths and structures in front of the new hedge line shall be lowered to and are thereafter maintained at carriageway level and shall be fully implemented prior to the dwellings being occupied. These properties are now occupied. This condition was not enforced by Shropshire Council, even with enforcement procedures carried out at the start of the construction of a feather-edged board timber fencing. And that's the end of that statement. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Miranda. Does the planning officer wish to clarify any points in response to that?
No, Mr. Chair, nothing further to add. I did touch on the enforcement issue in my presentation, as that had been brought to my attention actually at some point last week.
Thank you. Yeah. And you mentioned about the fence and the wooden fence there. Yeah. Okay. Members of the committee, now you can make comments, please. Solicitor will indicate who's to speak next. Thank you.
No indications yet, Chair.
Yeah, okay. In that case, can I have a proposer, please, if there's nobody wanting to debate it?
Councillor Hunt is indicated, and then Councillor Mosley.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt.
Well, I'm quite happy to let Pam speak first if she wants. Having been encouraged to go to a proposal, I was going to go to a proposal with a few words, but if Pam was going to do something similar, I'm seeing they're all ganging up now. Come back to me in a bit, Chair.
Okay, will do. Councillor Mosley.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt. I'd like to support this. I am a little bit amused by the comments of the parish council, because from what they spoke about having good boundaries and transition into the countryside, and this seems to be an edge of village settlement where we have, from what I can see, hedge behind a very low 1 metre wall, followed by a complete hedge line. I'm a great fan of good boundaries. I think that's something that's been lost in modern developments, is having good front walls or hedges. You know, we all have cars on the drives now and an open aspect. And I think this is actually a really good boundary treatment. I'd like to support the application. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Mosley.
Councillor Jones is indicated, Chair.
Councillor Jones, please.
Yeah, I'd echo Pam's comments. I'd also like to strongly say that the planners really need to up their game and get us a few more pictures and better diagrams of all these things that we're looking at now. I don't see any reason why that can't be done now that we've got mobile phones, drones, we've got lots of technology, and I think the planners need to up their game on this. But I support it. I think it looks a nice little settlement and will add to the village and make it look quite posh, to be fair. I'm not sure what the rest of War looks like, but I always thought it was supposed to be quite a nice village. So
yeah.
I support it.
You support it. Is it seconded or not? Or no, if you don't want to.
Councillor Hunt's indicated again, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Hunt.
Yeah, I thought I'd come in on the tail of that runner too. I'm not sure if either actually proposed or seconded there. Obviously, if Pam proposed, then I'm prepared to obviously defer that proposal to her, and if Mark seconded, then I'll defer that seconding to him. Either or. I am a little bit disappointed that obviously the first planning consent did actually give some boundary recommendations. In the form of the conditions that weren't adhered to. I am pleased that they have decided to reduce the height of the wall and that they are planting a native hedge, which I'm sure Councillor Dean will agree is, good for the environment. We should see more of these. I would say that I personally don't have a particular issue with this, so I will be supporting it. But I am a little disappointed that, as I say, we've just heard some applications today that we've put some boundary conditions on, and if people are not going to adhere to those boundary conditions and then just go ahead with them as part of the original development that should adhere to those conditions, one has to ask what the point in putting conditions on anything is. That said, well, that's all I've got to say on it, really. So, Councillor Mosley, did you actually propose, or do you want me?
I'm happy to propose. Thank you.
All right. And Mark, did you second?
He showed his hand. Yeah, Mark,
right.
You second.
Then I will neither propose nor second. I will now be quiet.
Okay. So yeah, Mark, you have seconded it, haven't you?
Yes.
Okay, that's good. Right. If there are any more speaks, Miranda?
No, Chair, don't appear to be.
Okay.
Would you like me to put that to the vote then, Chair?
Well, yeah, unless there's more points the planning officer wants to make or yourself.
Not from me, Chair.
Okay.
No, Mr.
Okay.
Chair, the presenting officer has no further comment.
Okay, in that case, we'll go for the vote. Thank you, Miranda.
Thank you. So the proposal is in accordance with the officer recommendation. Councillor Aldcroft. Oh, sorry, I beg pardon. He's not participating in this, is he? Councillor Bardsley.
4.
Councillor Dakin.
4.
Councillor Dean.
4.
Councillor Green.
4.
Councillor Hunt.
4.
Councillor Jones.
4.
Councillor Mosley.
4.
Councillor Roberts.
4.
Councillor Basma.
4.
Councillor Wynne.
4.
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much. Right, so that's unanimous. That's gone through the officer's recommendation. So now we'll move on to item 9, Church Lane, Ash Magna. Can the planning officer present this, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's Philip Molyneux yet again. Application proposes erection of a part single-storey extension and part 2-storey extension to the rear elevation and alterations to the existing porch roof on a dwelling at 23 Church Lane, Ash Magna, Whitchurch. There are no updates on this application. The application is brought to committee as the applicant is an employee within planning services. The application refers to a 2-storey rendered dwelling. The site sits in a large domestic curtilage. If we could have the slides, please. The first one, there's quite a number to go through. The first one indicates the site outlined in red with the dwelling and the garage within the curtilage. Next slide, please. Which is the block plan indicating the proposed extension to the rear, which is part 2-storey and single-storey, and alterations to the porch on the front elevation. Next slide, please. That shows existing floor plans on the ground floor. And that's the proposed ground floor, enlarging it to the rear to create a larger open plan kitchen, snug stroke dining area. Next slide, please. This is existing floor plan with 3 bedrooms. Next slide, please. This indicates that it's a reconfiguration and slight in order to allow an extra bedroom. Next slide, please. These are the existing front elevation. That's the proposed front elevation with the alterations to the porch. Next slide. That's existing side elevation. Next slide, please. And that'll shows how it'll look once the extensions are constructed. Next slide, please. That's existing rear elevation. Next slide, please. And that's the proposed rear elevation with the alterations to the existing floor area of the house and the single-storey onto the rear. Next slide, please. And this is the existing side elevation. Final one, please. And this is the proposed side elevation. Officers consider this a relatively straightforward application, which will update and improve the layout of the existing dwelling in a scale and design using external construction materials that are considered acceptable in relation to the surrounding built environment and residential amenity. With no adverse comments received, the recommendation is one of approval, subject to the conditions as set out in Appendix 1 attached to the report. And that concludes my presentation on this application, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Philip. Can the solicitor read out any public speaking statements, please?
Thank you, Chair. There aren't any public speaking statements on this one. It should just say Councillor Aldcroft has indicated that he'd come back into the meeting for this item, and Councillor Mosley has indicated that she's had to leave the meeting now, and Councillor Dakin has requested to speak.
Right, okay. Thank you, Miranda. Thank you, Councillor Dakin.
Thank you, Chairman. This is my area and I'm leaving the meeting now.
Okay, thank you. Right, so if there's no more indicate, can I indicate to speak? Is that okay? Yeah, I would like to go with the officer's recommendation. I propose that we go with the officer's recommendation on this one. So I proposed it.
Chair, Councillor Keith Roberts, I'll second it. Keith Roberts, I'll second it.
Keith, do we have speakers on it? Any more speakers on it?
Councillor Green, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Green.
Sorry, I was going to second it, but that was all. Okay, don't worry.
So, as we know, he thinks it's quite straightforward. So, if there's no more speakers, we'll go to the vote. Thank you, Miranda.
Thank you, Chair. No, there don't appear to be any more speakers. The vote's in favour of the officer's recommendation. Councillor Aldcroft.
For.
Councillor Bardsley.
For.
Councillor Dakin. Oh, sorry, he's not in this because it's his area. Apologies. Councillor Dean.
For.
Councillor Green.
For.
Councillor Hunt.
For.
Councillor Jones.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Mosley's left. Councillor Roberts.
For.
Councillor Vasmer.
For.
Councillor Wynne.
For.
It's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay, we'll go on to item 10, appeals and appeal decisions. Does the planning officer or solicitor wish to make any comments on these appeals?
Yes, the planning officer just got, there's an error in the appeals determined list where it refers to the third one Row Lane Cottages, Row Lane, Welshampton, as members will see on the decision attached. This one was actually allowed and not dismissed as stated in the appeal decision.
Thank you, Philip.
Okay.
So which bit was the error, Chair? The appeal decision, or?
I'll leave you to draw your own conclusions on that one.
Yeah, we'll leave that one, shall we? Anything else, Miranda or Philip?
I don't have anything on the appeals, Chair, but once the meeting has ended, just a brief comment to members about something else that is not in fact on the agenda just before they all leave.
Yeah, and so have I. Thank you, Miranda. So in that case, we'll go to item 11, date of the next meeting, which is 2 p.m. on Tuesday, 9th of February. Okay, so in that case, that concludes the agenda. We'll now close the meeting and ask the committee officer to end the live event. Thank you, Emily.